of gummy bear history. Back in 1920, in a small town in Germany, lived a man named Hans Riegel, who spent his days working in a candy factory. Now, he was super bored and uninterested in this job, so he decided to take it into his own hands and make his own candy. He started off by making hard candies that he would sell at street fairs or would deliver around the town on his bicycle. But unfortunately, these hard candies weren't selling very well, so he decided to change them up a bit. Instead of hard candies, he decided to make gummy candies in the shape of bears, and he named his company Haribo. Now, he first named these gummy bears Dancing Bears. And this is where things take a very dark turn. This actually broke my heart while I was doing research for this video. In Europe, following World War I, dancing bears were quite the attraction. And people didn't see anything wrong with this back then, which is crazy to me. I mean, this stuff wouldn't fly nowadays. The bears would often be chained or made to wear silly clothing, and usually they would remove their teeth entirely so that they wouldn't be a threat to the people watching them. Literally, doing research for this video, I was like crying, and I can't even show you the pictures I was looking at because it's so hard to see. But nevertheless, the bears were a very popular attraction at fairs and carnivals in most European cities. Like, people would love to go watch these bears being forced to dance in front of people. And that's what gummy bears are based off of. Take that in for a second. I absolutely had no idea about that dark history, and I feel like I'm almost gonna be grossed out by eating them now that I know that, because I don't want to support something like that. But yes, the name Dancing Bears was later changed to just gummy bears, and they're not associated with that stuff anymore. But I don't know, guys, I just still feel weird about it. But just to keep me safe, none of this stuff has been confirmed by this brand. Okay, so gummy bears became a huge hit, and they actually came out with this TV show. And if any of you guys remember watching this, it was such a strange show. It was called The Adventures of the Gummy Bears. This was a Disney television series that aired in the United States from 1985 to 1991. There were 4 seasons of this show, and it actually did really, really well. It's literally about this group of gummy bears that live in a land called Gummy Glen inside a hollow tree. And there were 2 episodes that featured characters that scared kids so much that I think they had to take them off the air. There was one called Night of the Gargoyle, which is about this cursed gargoyle that was sent to the king. And during the night, he comes alive and tries to destroy things around the castle, including the king. And then there was another episode about the Carpy King, and he's one of the main villains of the show, and he looks like this evil vulture thing. So those were 2 characters that really freaked people out. I kind of remember this show from my childhood. It was a little bit strange. Next, we're gonna talk about a story that actually happened to me when I was in elementary school, and we're gonna title it The Locker Mystery. So for those of you who miss my story times, here you go. Back when I was in grade 5, we had this strange locker mystery going on at our school. About halfway through the school year, people started smelling something weird coming from one of the locker hallways. Now, there were probably about 50 lockers in each hallway, so it was really hard to distinguish where the smell was actually coming from. I remember this one day, our teacher stood up in front of the class and was like,
"Alright guys, the locker hallway smells terrible, and I don't know whose locker it's coming from. So today, we're all gonna clean out our lockers. So get out there in the hallway and clean."
So he brought a bunch of garbage cans and cleaning supplies into the hallway, and we all spent about an hour cleaning out our individual lockers. And honestly, things started to smell a little bit better for about a day or so. But the next day, the smell was back, and even worse. We also had this disgusting ant infestation. Like, we would all be walking through the hallways, and we'd see these lines of ants walking beneath us. It was just so disgusting. And my teacher was really fed up at this point, so he decided he was going to follow the trail of ants to see whose locker they were going to. So the ants led him to this girl's locker. We're gonna call her Erica. Erica with the stinky locker. So he looks at Erica and he's like,
"So, what am I gonna find in your locker?"
And she was like,
"Oh, nothing, sir. There's nothing in there, nothing."
So he asked her to open it. And guys, when I tell you she had Gummy Bear World in her locker, I'm not even over exaggerating. She had this shelf at the top of her locker where she had this setup of literal gummy bears all over the top to make it look like a gummy bear town. Like, she had a mini gummy bear salon, a gummy bear school, and no one knew how long she had set up this gummy bear display in her her locker. So they were definitely stale and definitely filled with bugs, which was disgusting. And I remember the teacher being like,
Erica, why did you do this?
and she was like,
Some people play with Barbies. I play with gummy bears.
like, I could not make this up. So yeah, I just had to include this in the video because it is kind of creepy. And listen, I praise people for embracing their weird side, being strange and unusual, but when it comes to leaving out food, you just don't do that. All right, let's talk about the gummy bear skeleton that was going around the internet a few years ago. There's this gummy bear anatomy puzzle toy available to buy that everyone was talking about. It's designed by artist and designer Jason Vee. Now, this is literally the description of this product. It says, learn all about the anatomy of those delicious fruit-flavored candies. The bear features a sturdy, clear plastic case that serves as the skin that holds the skeleton and organs in place. The skull cap can be removed to expose the brain. The brain can be removed and splits apart into 2 pieces. These organs are solid and durable. How about no thank you? All right, lastly, we're gonna be talking about a creepy gummy bear game glitch. This comes from the game Gummy Bear Mini Golf. You heard that right. Now, this game came out in 2009 or 2010, and not a lot of people knew about it. It wasn't a popular game. It really didn't sell very many. But for those people who did purchase and buy this game, they gave it a very bad review. No one liked it. It didn't work very well. Like, during my research for this video, people were giving it 1 star and asking for their money back. And I found this really strange review slash story from this guy who had originally bought this game from a garage sale for $2. Why is every creepy game bought from a garage sale? Anyways, he brought it home and decided he would just try it out on his Wii. But when he got home and started playing it, he immediately noticed that something was very off about it. Now, it was pretty glitchy to start with, but that could have just been the problem with the game. It could have been that the person before him didn't take very good care of it. So glitches were one thing, but he also noticed this very creepy thing where whenever he would get his golf ball into a hole, this strange celebration music would start playing, and the bear would slowly turn its head all the way around to look directly at you, and it would just sway there for a few minutes looking at you while this creepy celebration music was playing. And the game wouldn't let you continue or exit or skip that part until the gummy bear was done looking at you. He also noticed there was this strange figure that was standing in one of the castle windows in the background, and it would only show up for a split second whenever the game would glitch. And yeah, this whole game just gave him some very weird vibes, so he literally threw it out the same day that he got it. And I don't know, maybe there's nothing paranormal that has to do with it. Maybe it's just a glitchy game that doesn't work well. But this guy swears there was something very off about this particular copy of the game. Jell-O is sold ready to eat or in powder form and is available in many different colors and fruit flavors. Jell-O was invented in 1897 in New York. I had no idea Jell-O was from the 1800s. A man named Pearl Bigsby Waite trademarked a gelatin dessert and named it Jell-O. He and his wife Mary came out with 3 flavors: strawberry, raspberry, orange, and lemon. Wait. Isn't that 4 flavors? It says 3 flavors and then it says strawberry, raspberry, orange, lemon. Listen, I didn't fail math. I know that's 4. In 1902, Jell-O was known as America's most famous dessert and came out with Jell-O cookbooks to increase awareness and make Jell-O a go-to for households. And over the next 10 years, they introduced new flavors such as chocolate, cherry, and peach. From the 1930s to the 1950s, they had a new trend for congealed salad. Now, congealed salad, I'm sorry if anybody likes this. It looks so disgusting to me, at least. But it was a huge trend and literally everyone was making it with Jell-O. It's literally salad and Jell-O. So like vegetables with Jell-O mixed with it. I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody that likes it. I just can't. I don't know. It's a texture thing. But that whole trend died down in the 1960s. And I mean, guys, the things that people would put Jell-O in would blow your mind. It had some very weird mixtures. Today, with over 110 products under the Jell-O name, they sell 1 billion Jell-O cups each year in the United States. Now, it is a little bit gross to think about what Jell-O is actually made out of. I'm not gonna go into it too much because, ugh. But Jell-O is actually a protein produced from collagen that is extracted from boiling animal bones. Jell-O, animal bones. That's what what we eat. Alright guys, so let's get into the creepier stuff. Now, Jell-O came out with these really creepy commercials that you guys might remember. They were just extremely creepy and everyone agrees, and I think that might have been the reason why they stopped making them. Now, Jell-O is not just like that wiggly clear stuff. Jell-O also makes pudding. I remember my mom always used to pack me a little pudding in my lunch when I went to school every day, and I used to love those things. Well, Jell-O came out with this ad that said, "Get your pudding face on." And basically, whenever someone eats the pudding, they get this super long, creepy smile on their face. So if they steal someone's pudding from someone else's lunch, it would be obvious to find out who the culprit was because they would get this like creepy long smile on their face. So I guess that was like the whole joke of the commercial. If you steal pudding, they'll be able to find you. So for example, there's this one commercial where these two kids are sitting in a principal's office. One of them has his head facing down while the other tells on him for stealing his pudding. And when the kid puts his head up, he has the long creepy smile, so they know he was the one who took it. And I feel like when people first watched that commercial, they weren't expecting it. In another commercial, this girl opens her fridge to find that all of her puddings are gone. So she goes and asks her father if he was the one who ate them. He's sitting there with the newspaper covering the bottom half of his face, and when he pulls it down all the way, he has that creepy, guilty smile. So they put these ads absolutely everywhere, and it was just so creepy to people. They had them on billboards, in stores, on posters, in the subway stations, and I feel like it was just very bizarre advertising. And I don't know about you guys, but it really reminds me of that Truth or Dare horror movie. You know, like the horror movie with the long like smiles? That looks just like the Jell-O commercial. It just didn't look natural, so it freaked people out. Alright, let's move on to a creepy phenomenon called the purple mass. There was a real case of a Jell-O-like substance that fell from the sky back in 1950. Now, it wasn't actually Jell-O, but I thought I would include this in the video because it reminded people of Jell-O. It was around 10 p.m. on September 26, 1950 in the city of Philadelphia. Two patrolmen were driving along the highway when they saw something resembling a parachute falling down into a field. And because this was so strange for them to see, they instantly called for backup, because when something falls from the sky, you're a little concerned. So they went to investigate, but when they got there, they realized it was not a parachute. This odd Jell-O-like object was draped over the grass, and it was so light that none of the grass was actually bending. It was like sitting on top of the grass. So the officers took out their flashlights, and when they put it over this object, they saw that it was misting. It was misting. It also had this purplish light glow that made it look like it had crystals inside of it. So basically, this object did not look like it was from Earth. And whenever they tried to pick it up, the part that they touched would just dissolve and disappear. So after about 10 minutes of watching it, the whole thing just disappeared. So it's always just remained this creepy mystery that no one knows what it actually was or where it came from. I say it's some sort of weird alien thing. And because it was such this weird phenomenon, they actually made a movie about it. The movie The Blob was actually inspired by this event. It was a science fiction horror movie that came out in 1958, and it's about this blob-like alien life form that consumes everything in its path as it grows and grows. I've never seen this movie before, but I know it's like a classic, and I had no idea it was based on a real event. I don't know, guys, there's Jell-O falling from the sky. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is a creepy dream that I had about Jell-O as a kid, and I know that sounds so weird, but this was literally a reoccurring dream. In the dream, I would be going to this Halloween party in one of my friend's basements, and it was so dark, and there was flashing lights and blaring music all around me, and on one side of the room there were tables full of food and snacks. And all of these snacks and treats were made out of Jell-O to look like creepy things. Like, you know how you can make Jell-O worms or Jell-O brains or just creepy stuff for Halloween? Well, there was this bowl of Jell-O on the table that had eyeballs in it. And I thought they were just candy, just like everything else, so I went and stuck my hand into this Jell-O bowl to grab one of the eyeballs, but as soon as I did that, all the eyeballs in the bowls turned and looked at me. I would always wake up right at that point, and I can't even tell you how many times I had that dream, but I'm not even kidding you, I stopped eating Jell-O after that. I couldn't do it. And that's why I haven't had Jell-O since I was like really young. Alright, Alright, the last thing we're gonna talk about is a real story about this little girl who had a ghost named Jell-O. So this little girl claimed she had this imaginary friend, and when people asked what its name was, she would say, his name's Jell-O. No one really knew why she called him Jell-O. They thought maybe it was because it was her favorite snack. She said that Jell-O only showed up when it was raining, and he only ever came through her bedroom window. She said he would knock on the glass 3 times and then she would go and open it. She described Jell-O as a man with a blanket over his head. And of course, when her mom heard that description of him, she was very nervous because it sounded like someone was literally just breaking into her bedroom window. But then she said, "No, mommy, he's not a real man. He floats." Excuse me? So this mother was so creeped out and she decided to put a lock on her daughter's window because she did not want Jell-O getting into there anymore. But then one stormy night, Jell-O went and knocked on the mom's window. She was just sleeping and suddenly heard these 3 knocks on the glass. And when she looked over to her window, she saw this figure standing behind it like this. And it literally just looked like a man with a white blanket over his head. But as she walked over closer to the window to see if she was just dreaming or not, she realized, wait, my bedroom is on the 2nd floor. There's no way he could just be standing out there. And then she saw that Jell-O was literally floating 2 floors off the ground. And since that day, she put locks on all the windows in her house so Jell-O would not be able to get in. So I just thought that would be kind of a creepy story to include in this Jell-O video. So tonight, look out for Jell-O. Hopefully it's not raining. First, we're gonna start off with some very brief history. You guys know the drill by now. Now, what surprised me while I was doing research for this video is that archaeologists have found traces of popcorn in 1,000-year-old Peruvian tombs. 1,000-year-old popcorn, guys. By the mid-1800s, popcorn was beloved by families as a late-night snack in front of the fire. But mass consumption of popcorn didn't start until like the 1890s, after a Chicago entrepreneur named Charles Creteurs built the first popcorn popping machine. And once that was made, it was a lot easier for people to have popcorn, obviously. And by 1900, he introduced a horse-drawn popcorn wagon. Imagine walking down the street and seeing a horse pulling like popcorn behind him. That's so cool. And by the mid-1900s, popcorn became the staple snack to have at the movie theater. And then the first microwave popcorn bags came out in 1981. And today, Americans eat about 1 million pounds worth of popcorn each year. Now, I've always wondered why they chose popcorn to be like the staple movie theater snack, because it's so loud and it's so messy. Like, all you hear is crunching while you're eating the movie. And I'm not complaining, I love popcorn, I love having it at the movie theater. Actually, if you want to know my secret, I get a medium bag of popcorn for myself and I pour a whole bag of M&Ms into it. Mwah, it's perfect. Okay, so let's move on to a very creepy popcorn commercial. So back in 2007, this commercial came out and freaked people out everywhere. It was just so bizarre that people look back and all agree that it was too weird to be aired. Now, before I show you some screenshots of this commercial, I need to give you brief background information first. Now, if you go into your pantry in your kitchen right now, you'll probably find this brand of microwave popcorn. This is probably the most popular brand of microwave popcorn in the world. It was created by a man named Orville Redenbacher, and he was born on a farm in Brazil in 1907. Now, at the age of only 12, he began growing and selling his own popcorn, which actually allowed him to save money for college. In the 1940s, he was making popped corn for supermarkets, and then in 1970, he came out with his own brand of light and fluffy popcorn that we all know today. And obviously, it was named after himself, Orville Redenbacher. I hope I'm saying his name right. Now, he unfortunately died back in 1995, and obviously after that, he wasn't appearing on TV anymore, he wasn't in commercials anymore, he wasn't on talk shows, but still his legacy did live on with the popcorn that he created. Well, in 2007, for the brand's 40th anniversary, they decided to make a popcorn commercial that shocked people everywhere. They basically wanted Orville to come back to life for this commercial. So they made a CGI version of him to be the star of this commercial. Now, this was obviously meant to be a genuine commercial, to be in loving memory of him, which is great, but everyone agreed that this CGI version of him just didn't look right. And if you guys watch the commercial, I can't show up because of copyright, but the way his mouth moves, the way his eyes look, the way he's talking, it just sounds so creepy. And to this day, people say it's the creepiest popcorn commercial that's ever aired. Alright, let's move on to a creepy children's story about popcorn. There was this very strange book that was written for children back in the 1800s, and it was basically filled with a bunch of short but strange stories. One of these stories was called Mr. Popcorn, and this character was basically described as a dapper ear of corn with a top hat. And this is literally how the story went. It's so disturbing. There was this ear of corn who lived in the neighborhood, and one day the neighborhood children snuck up on him and attacked him. They tore off all of his kernels and then put the kernels in this giant pot, heated it up, and created popcorn out of him. And it says the children ate happily and had their fill of poor Mr. Popcorn. Now, not only is this story super sad, but it's also super messed up. And you might be thinking, Jess, the story isn't that bad, relax. The thing is, all of these pages were illustrated for children to see. So one page showed the children chasing this ear of corn. Another page showed the children ripping off his kernels as he screamed and cried out in pain. And another page showed them basically roasting his body parts. I know they're just corn, but like to him, that's his body parts. So it was essentially a horror story, and today people still look back on that story that they were told as kids, and they still say it gave them nightmares. And yes, at the end of the day, it's just a piece of corn. I get it, but corn has feelings too, okay? Just to give you an idea of the other weird short stories that were in this book, there's another one called The Red Slippers. I know this isn't about popcorn, but I had to just bring it up to show you an example. Okay, so The Red Shoes. It's basically about this very spoiled little girl who got a special pair of red shoes that she wore everywhere. Now, this man who knew of this very spoiled girl put a curse on the shoes so that she would never ever be able to take them off. And the even worst part of the curse is that the shoes would force her to dance forever and ever. And this little girl ends up dancing herself to death because she's never able to sleep, she's never able to eat or do anything else but dance. And the man that cursed her said that was her karma for being a mean little spoiled girl. That's horrible. And if that story wasn't weird enough for you, you could actually buy a record with the song that was playing when the girl died from dancing so much. Imagine your mom putting that record on for you before you went to sleep at night. Excuse me? And lastly, there's a story called The Popcorn Mascot. There's a story about a guy who was walking home from his friend's house at 1 a.m. and he was passing through this small town in the neighborhood when he went by an alleyway and saw a figure in there by the side of his eye. So he stepped back to check what it was, and to his surprise, he saw this tall man in a popcorn costume. It kind of looked like a mascot you would see at like a sports game. Confused, he decided to continue his walk home, but he began to hear footsteps behind him. And when he turned around, he saw the popcorn mascot quickly following behind him.
What do you want?
He asked in a panic. He assumed it must have just been some crazy person out at this time of the night, but the man did not respond, so the guy decided to run home as fast as he could and locked his doors. The next day, as he was sitting eating his breakfast with the TV on, a sudden news broadcast appeared on the screen talking about how 3 people were killed the night before, and the police were currently looking for a man dressed as a bag of popcorn. And that's how the story ends. Why is it kind of like cheesy but terrifying at the same time? I never thought in my whole YouTube career that I would make a video about popcorn. Alright guys, so let's jump right into it and talk about the history of jelly beans. The origin of the jelly bean is a bit of a mystery. People believe that jelly beans are a combination of a candy called Turkish Delight that has been around for thousands of years, and the hard candy shell of Jordan almonds, which were invented in the 17th century. So they say when you put those two treats together, you come out with jelly beans. And it's said that this candy is shaped like a bean because beans were a huge part of the American diet back then. People ate beans all the time, so they wanted to take the dinner food and turn it into a candy. The earliest reference to jelly beans is associated with Boston candy maker named William Shraft, who urged people to send his jelly beans to Union soldiers fighting in the Civil War. Jelly beans became a widespread American treat in the early 20th century, sold with other penny candies. So literally, you used to be able to buy like a huge handful of jelly beans for only a penny. In the 1930s, people started to associate them with Easter, probably because they are kind of shaped like eggs. When I was a kid, I always used to get jelly beans and like little chocolates for Easter. Anybody else? The Jelly Belly beans that people know and love today are all thanks to David Klein. In 1976, Klein made his mark on the candy world by creating a new type of jelly bean that had a flavored inside as well as a flavored outer shell. Now, these Jelly Belly beans became so popular because they were very unconventional flavors like watermelon, cream soda, popcorn, licorice, root beer. It was just so weird for people at the time, and I heard somewhere that Very Cherry is the most popular one. Now, during research for this video, I found out it takes 7 to 21 days to create a jelly bean, a little jelly bean. Apparently, there's just so many steps to make them that it takes a while. And it's also important to note that beetle poop is actually what makes the jelly bean shiny, so enjoy that. All right, let's talk about a very scary jelly bean recall. In 2009, Jelly Belly left off an ingredient people were very allergic to. So you know how on the back of any snack or food, it tells you all the ingredients that are gonna be in there. They forgot to include that one of their Jelly Belly flavors was peanut butter, and it was actually made with real peanut flour, and they forgot to put it on there. So they had to recall the 7.5-ounce cylinders of 49 flavored Jelly Bellies. Obviously, if anybody had a severe peanut allergy and consumed these Jelly Bellies, it would be life-threatening. It was just a really bad time for them. Now, I wanted to talk about this very disturbing jelly bean creepypasta that I found. It's about this guy who always used to love jelly beans ever since he was a kid. And one year around Halloween, he noticed that Walmart started selling these gross flavors of jelly beans, like monster slime, brains, mummified bones, and blood. And for some reason, this blood flavor was the only package that had the word new written on it in these big letters. So he took all the flavors home to try them. He said that monster slime tasted like grapes, brains tasted like boogers, the mummified bones tasted like dog biscuits, and then he tried the blood flavor, and as soon as he bit into the jelly beans, they had a different crunch than the other ones. They almost like splat in his mouth as soon as he bit down on them, and they had this salty metallic flavor. In fact, this flavor was so believable to be blood that he thought that maybe he accidentally bit his tongue or his lip or something. The flavor was just too accurate. He then picked all of them up and ate them slowly one by one, savoring the texture and salty iron flavor of each bite. For some reason, he could not stop eating them. The next day, he went back to Walmart and bought 3 more packs. He was going through them like crazy. But he did start noticing that after he ate them, his mouth was really sore. One day when he arrived at the store, he saw that they were all out of the blood flavor. They only had the other flavors in stock, which he didn't think were as good. So he went up to one of the workers and asked where it was, and the worker told him that that flavor had been recalled. It turned out that those bags had been filled with beetles instead of jelly beans. And so as people would put them into their mouth and crunch down on them, the beetle would bite their tongue and the inside of their mouth, hence why it was blood flavor. And that's also why it had a different crunch than the other jelly beans. It's so gross to think about. But am I the only one who feels like I would realize if I was eating beetles instead of jelly beans? But then again, they do use beetles to make jelly beans, so maybe you wouldn't. Anyways, lastly, I wanted to talk about a jelly bean paranormal game. Now, this game is kind of funny. It's basically about this entity called the Jelly Bean King, and you're basically supposed to find out if you're worthy of meeting him. You take a piece of blank paper and draw a line down the middle. On one side of the page, you draw a happy face, and on the other side of the page, you draw a sad face. You place the sheet of paper on the floor outside of your bathroom, and you have to make sure your bathroom door is closed. You then stand in front of the paper that's on the floor, holding a jelly bean out in front of you, and you stand there and drop it over top of the paper. If it lands on the happy face, you are permitted to enter your bathroom. But if it lands on the sad face, you are not permitted to enter, and the game is over, and you will never meet the Jelly Bean King. I was like laughing when I was reading this. It's so weird because there is something ominous about it, but at the same time, it's like, What? So if you landed on the happy face, you enter your bathroom and stand in front of the mirror. Hold some jelly beans in the palm of your hand and hold them out. As you say, look what I've brought you, Jelly Bean King. Am I worthy? And if he feels like you're worthy, he'll appear in the mirror and will take your jelly beans as a peace offering. And the legend says that he literally looks like a man made out of jelly beans. So like his whole face is just comprised of these jelly beans stuck in his skin. Lovely. I found this game in like the deep dark places of the internet in my research. I don't even know what it means. Today we're talking about Pop Rocks, which I know sounds super weird, but you guys know that I do random videos on candies that we all should know about. It's just that a lot of these candies have some dark history, some strange things attached to them. This one actually has a very terrifying urban legend attached to it. But like I always do, we're gonna start off with the history of Pop Rocks. And before we get into it, comment down below if you've eaten Pop Rocks before. If you haven't, where have you been? Now, their origins actually extend all the way back to the 1950s. Pop Rocks have been the source of scandal, urban legends, and parental fear. People say that Pop Rocks may be the most misunderstood candy ever. They became famous and ultimately notorious for creating tiny explosions inside kids' mouths. It was the feeling of fireworks going off inside one's skull. Now, the invention of Pop Rocks was actually by accident, which is kind of interesting. The story begins back in 1956. There was this chemist named William A. Mitchell, and he was experimenting on creating an instant soft drink. What he was working on was a drink powder that, when mixed with water, would transform into a fizzy carbonated drink. So they were working with this drink powder that was supposed to become soda, if that makes sense. But it didn't work, and instead it created these little colorful chunks that would pop when placed in the mouth. Those small fragments are filled with tiny bubbles of carbon dioxide. So like I said, when the candy is placed into your mouth, the heat and moisture causes the candy to dissolve, leading to those tiny little gas bubbles to burst and make that distinctive popping sound, and it creates like that tickling sensation in your mouth. I don't know about you guys, but I never really enjoyed this candy. The popping actually freaked me out a little bit, like I heard it like in my face and I did not like it. Comment down below if you like Pop Rocks. Do people still eat these, or am I just really old? Okay, so let's get into this very creepy urban legend. So one of the biggest rumors about this candy is that it is extremely dangerous, like lethally dangerous. There was this myth that occurred back in the 1970s that said some child somewhere in the world scarfed several bags of Pop Rocks in combination with soda and then died after it made his stomach swell and explode. That was the rumor. There was also this very specific rumor back in 1971 that involved this kid that appeared in a Quaker Oats commercial for Life cereal. The commercial starts off with two brothers looking at the bowl of cereal, wondering if it tastes good because it's supposed to be healthy cereal. So they call their youngest brother named Mikey to come and try it out. Now Mikey happily eats the cereal, and then both brothers say Mikey likes it at the very same time. And the phrase actually became very popular for a few years. Anyway, the story goes that the boy who played Mikey in this commercial died by combining Pop Rocks and soda. But that was all just a made-up rumor. The actor who played Mikey, his name is John Gilchrist. He did not die, and actually in 2012 he talked about how this rumor impacted his childhood. He first heard this rumor about him in the late 1970s, and his mother actually received a tearful phone call from a friend offering her condolences that her son had been killed by candy. And this poor mother's like hearing this from her friend, and she looks over at her son who's sitting on the couch, and she's like, no, he didn't. He's right here. So Pop Rocks received over 50,000 letters from concerned parents about taking the candy off the shelves because they thought it was too dangerous. Now it got so bad, like all these messages from these parents, that the FDA actually set up a hotline to inform parents that the candy popping away like tiny fireworks in their children's mouths was perfectly safe. Now the creator of Pop Rocks even said that the worst thing this candy will ever do to you is just make make you burp. It will never harm you. While Pop Rocks mixed with soda may not be lethal, the combination does indeed produce an excessive amount of gas. And while the amount of carbon dioxide expelled may not be enough to actually kill someone, it is enough to blow up a balloon, which I find fascinating, and I kind of want to do this experiment on my vlog channel. Comment down below if you want me to try this, as long as like it doesn't actually like explode in my house. Hopefully not. Anyways, though, I found this other creepypasta that is super creepy. It's called The Man in the Lake. There was a story about a boy who lived in a pretty remote area with his family. Their house was right next to a lake, and their nearest neighbor was probably a 15-minute drive away. Now, this boy was very afraid to go to sleep at night because whenever he would suddenly be woken up by this feeling of water dripping on his face, and when he opened his eyes, he would see this tall, dark figure hovering over his bed, soaking wet and covered in seaweed and mud. He called this thing the Man in the Lake, and it seemed like each night he would walk out of the water and into his house. Now, the house they lived in was almost 100 years old, so he started wondering if maybe something bad happened at his house in the past, and that's why this man's spirit kept coming back. Maybe there was some sort of like unfinished business. Well, he became tired of constantly being startled awake by this creature every single night, so he wanted to try and find a way to be warned that he was coming. So he walked into his kitchen one evening and stumbled across some old packs of Pop Rocks from a couple Halloweens ago. Now, he spread them all over the floor in his house, going down the hallway to his room, and this way, when the soaking wet creature walked into his house, the water would make the Pop Rocks start to fizzle loudly, and hopefully that would be enough to wake him up. I mean, it's kind of weird, but if it works. The plan actually worked perfectly, and around 1 a.m., he heard the muffled fizzing from behind his door. It was getting closer and closer as this thing was stepping down the hallway, and before it was able to open his door, he got there first and held it closed. The doorknob jiggled a few times, and then he heard the man slowly walk away and leave the house, and after doing this for about a week straight, the creature never came back because he was unable to actually get into the room. So yeah, if you ever expect a monster is coming into your house, get your Pop Rocks. Pop Rocks will save you. The shockingly sour, then sensationally sweet taste of Sour Patch Kids is something that everybody knows and that many people love. The early production of Sour Patch Kids took place in the late 1970s in Ontario, Canada, created by Frank Galatoli. I did not know that these came from Ontario, Canada. That's where I live. Now, what I found so interesting during my research is that in the beginning, the Sour Patch Kids were actually shaped like Martians, and they were called Mars Men. This was to capitalize on the space craze of the 70s, and then they transformed into children to capitalize on the Cabbage Patch Kids craze of 1980s. So it was like they were constantly trying to transform into what was trending at the time. So they went from aliens to Cabbage Patch Kids. The first packages of Sour Patch Kids featured a blonde boy based off of Frank Galatoli's son. Then later, starting in 1992, the package featured a more modern looking Scott with a baseball cap as well as a girl, and both of these kids on the packaging seemed to be crazy for the candy. And then in 2010, the packaging ditched the boy and girl mascots in favor of the candy themselves, and they are now the official mascot of the candy. The little candies are displayed to be mischievous children both on the box and in the commercials. Comment down below if you enjoy eating this candy, because if you do, I guess you like sour things. I really don't. So they came out with something a little bit controversial, but also I find it to be really interesting. One Halloween, they came out with Sour Patch Kids Heads and Bodies. Yes, you heard that correctly. Sour Patch Kids Heads and Bodies was a Halloween-themed promotion available in the UK that features their little decapitated heads and matching torsos. This is such a bizarre thing that was created, but I'm also so fascinated and kind of wish I lived in the UK so I can get this. But a lot of parents did think this was a little bit too much, a little bit too creepy and scary, because you are just eating like body parts in candy. But I don't know, I like anything strange and unusual. Then I was able to find this creepy Sour Patch Kids game, and I probably would have loved this as a kid, honestly. Basically, you hold the little bag of Sour Patch Kids in your hands and you reach in without looking, and you have to pull out one of the colors. And then the color that you pick means something, and you're only able to do this once. So the color that you get is what you get. So here's what each of the colors mean. So red means there's a ghost standing in the same room that you are in. If you get green, it means your house is pure and clear of anything negative. If you get blue, it means there's a ghost somewhere in your house, but you're not really sure where it is. If you get yellow, it means bad luck is coming your way. And if you get orange, it means very good luck is coming your way. So I think we're gonna try and do this little weird game on the vlog channel because it does sound kind of interesting and I am curious what color I'm gonna get. I'm gonna make a guess right now and say I'm gonna get orange because I want good luck. If you happen to have Sour Patch Kids with you right now, try doing this and let me know what color you got. Or I don't know, maybe this game would freak you out from eating them ever again. Okay, and then lastly, I found this really sad, sort of disturbing story. It's called David Went Missing. It's about this girl in 8th grade who had a crush on this boy named David, and she was pretty sure that he liked her too, because almost every day while she was putting her things in her locker, he would sneak a little bag of Sour Patch Kids in there when she wasn't looking. She thought that maybe this was like his little way of flirting with her, and this went on for months and months until he finally asked her to go to the movies with him. They had a date for that evening at 8 p.m. and he said that he would meet her right outside the doors of the theater. Well, she got there and she waited and waited for him to arrive, but he never showed up, and their movie started playing and she thought that she had been rejected and just like left there on the spot. So she decided to walk back home all by herself, feeling really sad and rejected and just not great. But the next day at school, there were police officers everywhere and the principal was asking all of the students when the last time they had seen David was. Well, turns out he had not come home from school the previous day and was officially declared as missing. Well, the story ends by saying that he was never found and this girl was heartbroken. But every single year on the anniversary of the day he went missing, she would find a little Sour Patch Kids bag in her locker. Ugh, this is such a sad story, and I'm sorry I had to like end the video with this because it ends it off on such a negative and sad note. I hope this isn't like a real story, who knows, it could be. But if it is, obviously David's spirit is somehow still letting her know that he cares by putting the Sour Patch Kids in her locker still. I don't know, I could cry about this. In the year 1898, several cookie companies came together to form the National Biscuit Company, also known as Nabisco. In 1902, Nabisco rolled out Barnum's animal crackers for the first time, making them famous by selling them in a little box designed like a circus animal cage, and it actually featured a string on the box so the package could be hung on Christmas trees. People loved this idea. And then in 1912, Nabisco had an idea for a new cookie. They wanted it to be 2 chocolate discs with a cream filling in between. The thing was, this had already been done by a company called Sunshine Biscuits, and they had called the cookie Cookie Hydrox. While Nabisco has never named Hydrox as its inspiration, many people say that it was a complete copy. So despite its potentially suspicious origin, the Oreo made a name for itself and quickly surpassed the popularity of its competitor. So it kind of has a rocky history. Some people think it literally took the idea from this other company, and it's kind of become a debate over the years. So let's talk about its mysterious name. Some people wonder where the heck they got the name Oreo from. What does it mean? The thing is, the people at Nabisco aren't quite sure anymore. Some believe that the cookie's name was taken from the French word for gold. Others claim it came from the hill-shaped test version of the cookie that they never took to market, because apparently Oreo is the Greek word for mountain. And this next part is a little bit confusing. Some people speculate that the name comes from a combination from taking the R-E from cream and sandwiching it just like the cookie between the 2 O's in the chocolate, making it Oreo. Does that make sense? Still, others offer the bare explanation that the cookie was named Oreo because it was short, fun, and easy to pronounce. So let's talk about what happened with the Parent Trap movie, because they did something in that movie that became a worldwide trend. If you haven't seen the Parent Trap, stop watching this right now, take a pause, go watch it and come back. In the 1998 remake of The Parent Trap, Lindsay Lohan's characters Holly Parker and Annie James introduced us to the concept of Oreo cookies and peanut butter. Now this blew the minds of 90s kids everywhere, so much so that director Nancy Meyers is asked about it all the time. She said that she just made it up for no reason other than it sounded weird and some cute kid would do it. So she just last second made it up for the movie, and people everywhere started doing this. It became a common snack to like dip your Oreo into peanut butter. Okay, let's talk about the 3 AM Oreo commercial. We're starting to get a little bit creepy. I found this post from a 30-year-old man that remembers seeing a really disturbing Oreo commercial as a kid, but anybody that he tells, there's no one that's able to remember it. He feels like it's just him. So he was basically pleading to the internet for someone to find this for him, or for someone to tell him that they remember it too. The weird thing was, it would always come on the TV at 3 AM exactly. He always used to fall asleep in his bedroom with the TV on because he just hated sleeping to the silence. I know a lot of people are like that, but this commercial that would come on at 3 AM would jolt him awake. It would show this skeleton head that would suddenly appear on the screen screaming, and as it was screaming, it would slowly lift up its skeleton hand and would stuff an Oreo into its mouth and would start choking on it as it was screaming. Now, he said it always felt like the commercial was so long, like it went on for 5 or 10 minutes. And then the screen would turn black and the words, "That's not how you eat an Oreo," came up on the screen. Like the commercial didn't even make any sense to him. But he remembers that that screaming skull would really scare him. Like he would dream about it. It would just freak him out so much. Like even the noise of the screaming would jolt him awake, and he said there was just something so sinister about it. Now, I don't remember ever seeing this commercial, so comment down below if you do, or was it all just in his head? Then lastly, we have this horrible game that's called Oreo, and it's played on the schoolyard and should be banned everywhere. Oreo is a game where you play rock, paper, scissors with somebody, and the loser has to ask the ugliest person out at their school. So yeah, when I heard about this, I was absolutely horrified. Like, I can't believe this was invented or kids ever played it or are playing it. If you ever see this game being played at your school, please either stop it, tell an adult, and please do not participate in it. I read this girl who was a target of this game, and her crush fake asked her out, and when she said yes, he ran away laughing, which is horrible and heartbreaking. Now obviously the Oreo brand has nothing to do with this. The game is just randomly called Oreo. I don't know if there's a reason for it, but yeah, there were so many angry parents online talking about this Oreo game going on at school. So like, stop. Please stop this game. Anyway, sorry to end it off on a horrible note, but I had to bring that up. I mean, stuff like that is just unacceptable, obviously. Okay, so let's get into the history of Hershey's Kisses. Hershey's Kisses is a brand of chocolate produced by the Hershey Company in 1907. The bite-sized pieces of chocolate have a distinctive shape, sometimes described as a flat-bottomed teardrop. Hershey's Kisses chocolates are wrapped in squares of lightweight aluminum foil. They have been one of the most popular candies to have on Valentine's Day. But you may be surprised to learn that Hershey's wasn't the first company to come out with these tear-shaped Kisses chocolates. It turns out a competitor named Henry Oscar Wilbur released a remarkably similar product in 1894 called the Wilbur Bud. The Wilbur Bud achieved its shape through the cumbersome process of molding. So basically, melted chocolate was literally poured onto something and it gave it that sort of teardrop look, and then it was left there to solidify. It was not wrapped in foil. And so Hershey saw this and they streamlined the process with a machine that formed the right shape automatically with a nozzle, plopping kiss after kiss onto a cooled conveyor belt for speedy delivery down the assembly line. And apparently this nozzle also makes like a kissing sound whenever it releases the chocolate, which I think, was that on purpose or not? So yeah, basically the Wilbur Buds were like handmade. It took such a long time, and Hershey's had a huge factory. And they saw that people didn't want to carry around like the chocolates without the foil because it was melting in people's hands, and that's why they decided to come out with this foil to go around them, which was also put on by the machines as well. Everything was just so easy with Hershey. And since Hershey was already incredibly popular in the early 1900s, these teardrop chocolates took off, and a lot of people forgot about the Wilbur Buds. I kind of feel bad about that. I feel like a lot of history of candy companies, they saw like another small business doing something and they're like, yeah, I can do that better. So don't forget about the Wilbur Buds, okay? They started it. Okay, so let's get into some weird facts. Hershey's made a kiss that tipped the scales at more than 30,000 pounds to celebrate its 100th anniversary, putting it on display at Chocolate World in Hershey, Pennsylvania in 2007. Obviously, this was like the largest chocolate ever made. That's insane. The kiss machines machines in Hershey, Pennsylvania run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Apparently each day they make 70 million kisses. That's insane. Apparently if you lined up all the kisses that they made in a year, it would span 300,000 miles. Also take note of the street lights when strolling Chocolate Avenue in Hershey, Pennsylvania. More than 100 are shaped like Hershey's Kisses, wrapped and unwrapped. Apparently these were installed in 1963 and they're pretty interesting to see. It reminds me of like a Dr. Seuss world or something. Like everything in this area is just like chocolate themed and weird. Hershey's Kissmobile has traveled 250,000 miles, giving out samples and sparking smiles since its debut in 1997. Like these vehicles literally just hold tons of chocolates in them, and like I'm fascinated. Another weird fact is that Hershey and his wife Kitty had tickets to board the Titanic on its maiden voyage, but something made them return home instead. They had some business thing that kept them from getting on the Titanic, but could you imagine if they did? Because we all know what happens, and then who knows where Hershey's chocolates would be now. And have you looked at the logo? Because there is a sideways kiss hiding between the K and the I in Kisses, and now you'll never be able to unsee it. I remember a few years ago I did like a whole video on like secret symbols and logos. I love it. I went to school for graphic design and I love that they put a secret kiss in their logo. Alright, so let's get into the creepypasta. This is called The Secret Message. This is about a girl that found a little package of kisses in her locker on Valentine's Day. She had no idea how the person put them there, as she obviously had a lock on her locker, but she was just so excited by the idea that someone in her school had a crush on her. She brought them home and sat on her bed and opened the package and ate Hershey's Kisses rolled out. And she picked one up to eat when she noticed something very strange. So you know that little paper that sticks out of the top that says Kisses on it? I presume they put this in there to make like opening the chocolate a lot easier. You just like pull it and it just like unwraps. Well, instead of saying Kisses on that paper, it was this long sheet of paper that was stuffed inside the chocolate, and there was like sloppy handwriting on it written in pen. So she pulled it out and the first one said, "Your hair is so pretty, I love the way you brush it." She pulled out the second one and it said, "I love the red sneakers you put on every morning." Now she kind of thought it was sweet that every single kiss that she had something nice written about her, like this person who had a crush on her took the time to do this for her. So at first she was like really flattered about this. Then the third one said, "I love that you read books on the bus to school." But then things started to take a turn and the messages got creepier and creepier by the moment. The fourth one said, "I love that you turn your bedroom light off at 10 p.m. on the dot each night." Are you kidding me? Then the fifth one said, "I love that you bring a flashlight with you to get water from the kitchen at 3 a.m. So you're telling me he's literally watching her at 3 a.m.? The sixth one said, "I love that when you're home alone, you put on Disney movies as background noise." So I guess she's not really home alone, is she? The seventh one said, "I love that you still snuggle with a stuffed rabbit at night, even in high school." Oh boy. And the last one, the best one of them all, the eighth one said, "I love that you never see me looking through your window." Okay, so obviously this took a very dark turn. That is terrifying. This actually reminds me of the story that I just did about the watcher who was like stalking that family. Clearly this girl is being watched and stalked, getting creepy messages. Honestly guys, there's nothing worse than getting anonymous messages that are creepy, because literally it makes you paranoid. You're always looking around. You have no idea who sent them to you. Like, no thank you. I decline. If I got this, it'd be going right to the police. So thankfully I believe this is only a creepypasta. Hopefully that is the case.